Hey, welcome back to the stash. Peter is humanity. It's one of those phrases that hits you, right? A simple but powerful description of everything Peter Parker is supposed to be. It's a reflection of his struggles, his resilience, and his ability to fall and rise again. It's the reason we connect with him, why he's not just a hero, but our hero. He's flawed, he makes mistakes, but deep down he always tries to do the right thing. That's what makes him Peter Parker. That's what makes him the amazing Spider-Man. But what happens when that idea, this foundation of who Peter is, gets severely twisted? What happens when it feels less like a celebration of his humanity and more like a parody of it? That's when we find ourselves with the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man storyline, but more specifically, the Amazing Spider-Man issue 66. A comic that doesn't just miss the mark, it breaks the bow entirely. This isn't a story about the Peter Parker we all know and love, not even remotely close. This is a story about a hollow shell of him that's been present ever since One More Day nearly 20 years ago. Someone who stumbles so far from what makes him Peter that it's impossible to ignore. It's frustrating, it's disappointing, and at times, it's just straight up depressing. But before we dive into the story of the issue, I wanted to take a quick second to say that here at The Stash, we're on a mission from God to reach 6,000 subscribers before the end of January. It's a huge ask, but with your help, every like, every comment, every share, I know we can do it. So if you like Spider-Man or just comic content in general, consider sticking around and maybe hitting that subscribe button. But anyway, with all that being said, let's get straight back into the video. So our story begins in CYTTORAK's throne room where tension fills the air. For CALLIX, as I complained about in the last video, killed Spider-Man after he had lost the challenge. CALLIX doesn't see it that way though, his pride and ego are far too big for something like that, but even as he pleads his case, all he gets in return is mockery and silence from his father. In New York, we find Peter Parker sitting on a rooftop eating pizza. It's been days since he's given up and cursed the earth. Days since he's gone against the very core of who he is. He's even been neglecting his personal life big time, with him failing Aunt May and Randy Robertson, all because he knows they'll eventually all die. But as he mopes around and leaves to find more food, Doctor Strange and CYRA, the scion basically responsible for Peter being this way, are seen observing him. For CYRA has taken a deeper interest in the former Amazing Spider-Man. Later on, Pete heads to a convenience store where he overhears some bad news. The man he saved back at the start of the story, the window washer, has died, and they can't even afford to bury him. This only validates Peter's feelings even more as he slowly reaches for an ice cream tub. But as soon as he grabs it, the cashier is then held at gunpoint. It's a classic robbery, the kind of crime Spidey used to handle in a couple of seconds, but now, with Peter in this state, he does something different. He starts to lecture the common thug and even rants about the broken system. And just when the guy with the gun is about to put us all out of our miseries by shooting Peter, Spider-Boy, oh for fuck. Spider-Boy swoops in and saves the day, with some incredible dialogue telling the thug to not make fun of mental health because it's important and because some people need medication and because that's okay and because also stealing is wrong. Do you see how fucking clunky this shitty dialogue is? He's doing a simple kick. The guy just said to Peter, "Are you off your meds because you sound crazy?" Which he does. There's no need to say all this shit. Anyway, as the book slowly turns me into this version of Peter Parker, he pays no attention to Spider-Boy and buys the ice cream. As Pete walks down the street eating straight from the tub like a real man, Spider-Boy catches up to him and gives him some serious life advice. This is the second time in the one story where a 10-year-old has given Peter therapy. Jesus Christ. Peter tells him to basically quit being Spider-Boy because he's just a kid and things will never get better. All the while this is happening, Doctor Strange and CYRA continue their observation, making note of how him quitting isn't normal. We also get to see CYRA actually admit she cares about Peter, which is interesting. We then cut to Times Square where Peter and Shay? Hey, does anybody remember who Shay is? No? Okay, thanks. Meet up for the first time in ages because since the trial he's completely ghosted her. Shay is rightfully fed up with this treatment, but she still tries her best to get through to Peter. Even when he asks her how she manages to keep going when it all feels so pointless, she tells him a story about a patient she grew close to who ultimately passed away. It was the first time she properly wanted to quit, but then after a couple of days it hit her. Yes, death does happen every day, but at her core, she likes being a nurse. She likes helping people, and that's enough. Because pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Before she walks off, she tells him to find professional help and hopes what she said helped him. To which Peter responds with, "It doesn't." We then take a small break and go all the way to the X-Men headquarters, where we see the X-Men prepare to travel to New York after the Juggernaut warns them of a great danger. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here's one of the worst parts of the entire volume. Keep in mind, throughout that interaction Peter had with Shay, they did not break up. So as the sun goes down, Peter heads to Felicia's apartment, where he just goes on a massive ramble recapping all the depression he's been feeling lately. Black Cat tries to help, but Peter's still too stubborn to really take any of it on board. He even makes fun of how, and I quote, "stupid and naive he was all the way back to when they first met, because we just have to bash Spidey in every single era." Anyway, Peter then admits to Felicia that at that moment, right now, he doesn't feel anything. Felicia tells Peter there's still good in the world as she gets in closer and kisses his lifeless face. And of course, in the distance, Cyra and Doctor Strange are still watching. Strange asks, what did she do to him? To make Spider-Man quit, you know, it has to be something extreme. How many deaths did she show him? Cyra reveals she showed him 3 million deaths. That's 2,191,000 more deaths than she did with Strange, because Spider-Man, I guess. Am I right, Niccolo? We then quickly switch scenes where we find CALLIX traveling beyond the casket, which is a rare thing for the Scions considering they wouldn't dare leave their father's protective shell. As he nears the danger, the Blight comes forth from the ground, and like the Poison Ivy boss battle in Asylum, tendrils try to latch onto CALLIX, to which he's able to escape. This just causes his ego to grow tenfold, and he begins to plot some sort of revenge. Anyway, our story ends with Kratos, another one of the Scions, ready to face Earth's champion, although he's nowhere to be found. But then, out of nowhere, the X-Men appear, accepting the challenge and ready to fight to save the Earth. When Justina Ireland did her first 2 issues in a row for The Amazing Spider-Man, I was more than impressed. She brought back some actual depth and effort to the title, which was obviously severely lacking for years. But jumping into issue 66 of Amazing Spider-Man, I'm incredibly disappointed that what she gave us here was complete brand new day slop. Peter is humanity. That's what Doctor Strange says. A description that used to carry weight, that used to feel like the essence of Peter Parker. It was meaningful. It was a reflection of everything that made Peter such a compelling, flawed, and deeply human character. But now it feels like a cruel joke, a kick in the face, and this issue drives that point home in the worst ways possible. Let's talk about Peter's depression. It's not a new concept for him. He's a character who's always wrestled with guilt, grief, and the crushing weight of responsibility. His apathy here is grounded, even understandable, but the way it's handled, it's so in your face, so exaggerated that it borders on a self-parody. And sure, when Peter enters these low points, he has the tendency to cut people off, to isolate him. That's part of his humanity. But there's a line that this issue crosses when it decides to make Peter Parker a fucking cheater. Let me be clear, if you're going to drag Peter Parker, the Peter Parker, to the point where he betrays the trust of someone he's with romantically or just in general, you need to at the very least build up that incredibly out of character moment. You need great foundation. You need compelling, gut-wrenching drama. But instead, what we get here is nothing of the sorts. A low point for Peter, sure, but one that doesn't feel authentic to his character. It's a betrayal, not just of his relationship, but of everything he stands for. I gotta ask though, what was seriously the point of Shay? You have her as a standard nurse at Ravencroft, that's all well and fine, but then you just forced her to become Peter's new love interest. Also, you could forget about her, then have him cheat.
You took everything from me.
I don't even know who you are.
Literally, this volume had no proper build-up of their relationship. We just shifted from phase to phase without any of the hard work, also we can get to this part. You know what's bad when the fucking Dragonfly's a more comic accurate Peter Parker than Peter himself in the modern day comics?
That's what makes you a real hero.
Maybe you're right.
And then there's Felicia, the black cat, once a character with her own agency, her own goals, her own presence in Peter's world. Now, she's reduced to nothing more than a crutch, a consolation prize for Peter when he's at his lowest. What happened to her story? Her aspirations, you know? What does she even do in The Amazing Spider-Man anymore besides comfort Peter when he's sad, only to break up with him a few issues later? It's frustrating and infuriating. A complete disservice to a character who deserves so much more. Nick Lowe needs to stop. Just fucking stop. He's proven time and time again that he cannot stand Spider-Man and his cast of characters. Hell, when the dynamic duo were in full force, there was literally no bounds to their destruction. And it's sad to see that after all the shit we've been through, it's only going to get even worse when we start Joe Kelly's run. The only positive thing I can say about this comic is the developments with the SCIONs are somewhat engaging, even if some aspects of it just feel undercooked. And CYRA continues to be the best out of the bunch, considering she's the only SCION with some sort of layers to her. But what sucks is those bright spots, very few, are buried under a mountain of poor character decisions and shallow storytelling, the kind that makes you wonder how the creators of this book can look at Peter Parker, a character who has carried the weight of the world on his shoulders for decades, a character who's endured loss, heartbreak and suffering, but still manages to hold on to his integrity and decide, let's make him worse. Reading this book feels like staring into the same pit of despair Peter's in, except it's not cathartic, not thought-provoking, it's just sad. Not for the reasons it wants to be, but because this isn't the Peter Parker we all know and love. This isn't the story he, nor us the readers, deserve. Well, enough of that depressing shit. I'm off to go read Ultimate Spider-Man. See you later, guys.